episode of Peephole Pictures, we're looking at Jailhouse Girls from 1984.
Dear Mom and Dad, how are you both? I hope you miss me as much as I miss you. Prison isn't really too bad. I mean, at least I'm still alive. I wish I had more friends, though. Jane's my friend. They took her away and changed her, but she's getting better now. Killer doesn't talk much. And Paulette, I don't know, I'm not sure I trust Paulette. I wish I had a good friend here. I do. But at least I'll be getting out in a few months, and maybe I can even go back to modeling school. I miss you both, and I love you. Give my love to Mr. T and tell him I know what it's like to be dog food.
Alright, Jailhouse Girls, 1984, directed by Henri Pachard, starring Ginger Lynn. Now, Ginger Lynn in this film, she plays a receptionist at, kind of like this, I mean, I guess it's a brothel, so to speak. It was a little unclear as to what exactly it was. I mean, the front of it is a traditional hotel, but basically, you know, guys are going in there to have sex with these girls, you know, prostituting themselves, so I guess you can lean more towards like a brothel, so to speak, with the way that things go. But anyways, she's an aspiring model, which was funny because when I originally watched this, I was like, oh, she wants to be a photographer. You know, she's up front of the desk, and she's kind of pretending to, you know, get her picture taken and taking photos and stuff. And anyways, one day, you know, things are going well, things, you know, are all good, but the cops eventually come in and they bust the whole operation. You know, they bring in all the girls, and by all the girls, I mean, there's only a couple of them, including the receptionist, so, I mean, it's a pretty small operation there. But anyways, one of the cops as well, played by Joey Silvera, and then from there, we get a women in prison film. So like I said, this is directed by Henri Pachard, who was a notable director in his own right. He's a filmmaker who really worked the entire time. He was, like, the entire stretch that he was alive when he started making films, up to his death. I mean, he was just constantly going, starting in the late 60s all the way into the 2000s. You know, he's done many notable films, man. He's done, like, The Devil and Miss Jones Part 2, Public Affairs. What else did he do? I mean, I guess later on, he would, when I say later on, I mean the next year, kind of the cutoff point, but he would do the 4-part miniseries of Taboo American Style, which, funnily enough, you have the cinematographer on this film, Ron Dorfman, who would actually work with him on the Taboo American Style miniseries. And Ron Dorfman as well, for horror fans, would probably be familiar with his work on Blood-Sucking Freaks, the notable film in its own right. But Henri Pachard is an interesting filmmaker because when it comes to this film, it's got a bit of a mean-spirited streak to it that I think will either really kind of turn some people on towards it or maybe kind of dispel them away. It's interesting kind of with this film being in 1984, you know, sort of the wave of films of, like, the women in prison films, like Caged Heat, you know, Black Mama, White Mama. I guess that's more of a prison escape film. Violence in Women's Prison. I'm not an expert on any of those kinds of films. I mean, I've seen plenty of them, but I always kind of consider them more to be, you know, mid-70s, early mid-70s and all that, you know, some like the Roger Corman stuff, like, I'm blanking on the name. I think, did Roger Corman do Caged Heat? I don't remember. I might be getting them mixed up. I might be blanking on the film that he did. But anyways, so, I mean, I guess it's less about kind of jumping on a bandwagon for a kind of film and more just about, hey, we can get these women, you know, together in this small kind of location and tensions are going to be rising. And with this jail, man, I mean, I don't know how this jail is still in business because all these wardens are doing, they're just molesting these poor girls, man. I mean, they don't even get to the jail before these girls are being molested, you know. We have this scene early on where we have Joey Silvera with another officer, and they're driving around. You know, I mean, these girls are, you know, they're not properly handcuffed. They're kind of chained up in the back, and right off the bat, the lighting in this exchange I thought was kind of peculiar because, you know, you have Ginger Lynn, you have the other women, and you know, they're chained up in the back. And initially, I was like, okay, do they film this like outside or something? Like this, it looks like sunlight. It looks like a strong amount of light going in this scene. and then they cut to a shot of behind the bars, looking up at the two officers, and that looks more like they actually, filmed it in a van. So I'm like, man, is this like a cut between something? Like, are these two different scenes? Like, are they not actually supposed to be in the back of this van? But no, they are supposed to be in the back of this van, because Joey Silvera, he just cannot help himself. He has to pull over to the side of the road and molest Ginger Lynn. And when he gets into, I mean, this is like a van, so, I don't know how much room there actually is to, really kind of go about this. Now, the framing of it, maybe it was in the same van, I don't know, but the framing is kind of off, because, I mean, he is fully standing in the back of this van, and I am thinking, like, I don't think there's enough room to stand in the back of this van. It was very peculiar, and I may be wrong about that, but at least from a viewer kind of perspective, the framing and the lighting was off. Now, this scene early on, I think, is a testament to how strong of an actress that Ginger Lynn is. I think Ginger Lynn, even outside of this film, is a very strong actress. She's done a lot of work. Actually, she was in Talk Dirty to Me Part 3. And Henri Pachard will actually go on to do Talk Dirty to Me Part 5 and Part 6. And actually, funnily enough, speaking of Talk Dirty to Me Part 3, she would be in this film with Raven in a small role, an uncredited role. And Raven actually plays a part in this film. Just something worth noting. But anyway, so going on with this film. So, I mean, when they get to the jail, I mean, it's almost kind of a cliche or something that you kind of expect in these kinds of women in prison films. You have the, like a female jail warden, and oh my gosh, all these female jail wardens, they're always so horned up. They're always horned up, angry lesbians. And I don't know what it is about these films, but it's like, you're already in a prison full of women, man. You got to have one more to kind of have this domineering force. In this film, we have her played by Chelsea Blake, and she, right off the bat, is just, she's not doing, well, let's just say, up to code inspections on these women. When Ginger Lynn gets there, she's slapping her on the butt. She's, I mean, just straight up digging around, and her front end over there, and I don't know what kind of inspections they're doing. I've never been to jail in a situation where I'm just like, I gotta get inspected, I gotta get my butthole inspected. Thankfully not, knock on wood. But I don't think that's up to regulations. But either way, right in this jail, tensions are already kind of high because all of the wardens, all of the guards, I mean, they're all just kind of horned up. And later on, they insinuate that there's like a game going on. It's sort of like, oh, are you going to play the game now? And it's like, wait, what game? What are you talking about, What's the game? Just having sex with the guards? Because with some of the dialogue, I forgot which scene it was exactly. I think it was towards the end. It may have been with Paul Thomas. I don't remember. I do apologize. But he makes a kind of comment that's like, yeah, you're going to time off your sentence. And is that a case of he's being literal about it, that they have to have, if they have sex, then it gets time off their balance, or is he just using that to their advantage to have sex with these women? I do not know, and I don't think it's that deep, but I thought it was worth noting nonetheless. So anyways, they get to this jail, and things are just not going well. They're just getting molested, man. They're just getting molested in this jail. Now, I don't know how this jail is up and running when all they're doing is just molesting the inmates, and by the inmates, there's only a couple of them. I mean, when it comes to the locations of this film, I mean, it's smaller kind of sets, but I don't think they actually look too bad. I think the interiors are actually pretty good, but I do think this falls into a case of something that a lot of adult films have a problem with, which is just overlighting, where there's just a lot of shadows on the back walls. Like, there's a scene in the middle of this when you have Kristara Barrington, who's a solid actress in her own right, man. You remember her from, like, China Silk, and she's sneaking out to, go have sex with Frank Serrone, and it's supposed to be, like, kind of like at night and all that, but the shadows on the wall were so prominent, man. It's like, man, you can just practically see the light coming from the other side of the camera. It is completely wild, man. But for the most part, there's only a couple sets in this. They have, like, the exit area of the jail cell. I mean, it looks like a small room. When it comes to stuff like this, if you're you kind of gotta suspend disbelief a bit as to a lot of these sets, and honestly, I don't think they're that bad. The only time when I was like really like, man, I don't know, this does not look like a jail in the traditional sense, is really towards the end when the women are actually making their effort to escape. The door kind of looks like, I don't even know how to really describe it. It's almost like a regular like door you get at like Home Depot, you know, and I mean that in a way where it's like, it's almost like what would go in front of a screen door, but not a regular door. You know what I mean? Like, you ever go to like a, you know, somewhere that has a screen door? I can't even try to describe it, but it kind of reminded me of that. I'm just like, man, it's like a screen door without the screen, you know. But a bit more industrial, if that makes sense. It's something about that the design there really kind of turned me off from the jail setting. But anyways, yeah, like I said, the film has kind of, it does have a bit of a mean streak to it. It's to the point where you know, I think the scenario is more extreme than how it actually plays out. Because essentially, I mean, these wardens, you know, they're taking advantage of these girls. They're like, hey, if you want to, you know, you're going to be good, you're going to, you know, do this and that. But I think it's also a highlight to how strong of an actress that Ginger Lynn is. Because it's interesting that early on, there's an assault sequence in the back of that van. And they're playing very funky, very upbeat kind of music. But I think Ginger in that scene is acting really well because, you know, she's not having to say a whole lot, but it's just like her kind of cries and her whimpers. They feel realistic, man. It feels like, you know, if you got rid of the music, you would take a much darker kind of feeling to it. Because the scene itself already feels dark. And actually later on, when it happens again, it's kind of the same thing where they're playing this upbeat kind of music. You know, it's very funky. But then you have that just really good acting from her. They're really good kind of reactions, which, you know, people kind of take for granted, I think. You know, people are sort of like, oh, well, all I got to do is react and all that. And I'm not an actor, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But it's one of these things where I'm like, man, just kind of like these like little sort of details that she's putting into her performance really kind of, I think, brings it to the next level where I'm just like, man, this is just, she's really selling this as this really kind of uncomfortable sort of situation. And speaking of music, man, you know, the soundtrack on this, pretty solid overall. Very funky soundtrack, and it made me smile because during the very first scene in this film with Taija Rae and Jerry Abel, this, man, they got like, I don't know if they got Steve Vai on guitar or something, man. This dude is shredding a guitar solo. And I was more focused on that than the damn sex that was happening on screen. I was like, man, this dude is shredding, man. Good lord. Also, it's very funny. I think Jerry Abel looked a lot like James Caan in one of these. There's a couple shots. I even took a note of that. I'm like, man, he looks like James Caan. You know what's going on there, man? Yeah, but anyways, as it goes on, I think the film has actually a pretty solid pace to it overall. Some of the sex doesn't overstay its welcome. Like that first scene with the two of them, with Taija Rae and Jerry Abel, it moves along at a pretty brisk pace where you get, you know, some pretty good shots in there, honestly. I think it does fall into the territory that a lot of these do have, which is just that when you have a camera so close to the action that it can be sort of like, almost, it almost becomes like methodical. Where it's not even, I mean, not even necessarily erotic, but it's sort of just like, you know, just placing the camera there. But some of the photography in this, I do think is pretty solid. I do think that some scenes, some moments, actually have a fair level of eroticism, you know, which works totally well. And overall, you know, I mean, when you're looking at these characters, you're not getting a whole lot of development from them. I mean, they're very, you know, they're distressed the situation they're in. They want to escape, but ultimately it becomes a case of like, okay, well, they're just here waiting to get kind of attacked by these people. And actually, it's crazy because they have one of the characters played by Kristara Barrington. And Kristara Barrington, I'm sorry, and it's where they put her in like a tower where they had to like climb a ladder to get up to her, and I'm thinking like, what kind of jail cell is this, man? There ain't even no bars on it. They got to climb this damn tower to get to her. Very strange situation, but she has a scene with Chelsea Blake and Paul Thomas, and that actually kind of intercuts back and forth between a scene with Raven. And Dick Howard is also in the film, and Raven is actually is good in the film too. She has a couple scenes in this, and I think she has a presence really kind of all her own, man. I think she's a real cool actress in this. She does a really good job, And I haven't seen a ton of her work, man, but I was just watching, so I'm like, man, Raven. I was watching this. I had the list of names. I was like, man, Raven is good in this film. She is a standout. And I think that's one of the things here, man. I think the acting in this overall is pretty solid. I mean, especially from the ladies. I think Ginger Lynn's a really solid lead in this. I think she's just a real solid actress overall. Ginger Lynn is someone who, I mean, you don't even have to be. I mean, you'd be familiar with her because of her adult work if you like looked her up or anything like that. But she's been in a lot of like mainstream stuff. She's been in like the Rob Zombie movies. She's been in like the Devil's Rejects. 31. She's been in like a bunch of horror movies, and I don't remember her in the Devil's Rejects, and I didn't see 31, so I really can't kind of speak for those. But those are popular contemporary films. Well, at least the Devil's Rejects is, I should say. But she is good in this, man. She works really well overall with the other girls in this, and. Actually, funnily enough, going back to that sequence before about the jail cell in the tower, I was laughing because you have Chelsea Blake in that scene, and she's like stripping. She has high heels on. I'm thinking like, I don't know if that's appropriate, work attire. It's kind of like nonsense in this. But anyways, in that scene, they're talking about they're talking to Kristara, and they're like, we know you had sex with one of the guards, one of the wardens. And I don't know how they found that out. I don't know how they even knew this was going on. I guess you can say though later on they say there's a game going on. Is Paul Thomas manipulating her? I really don't know, because when that scene happened, I was like, man, what? How do they know about that? And then later on, when they're talking about, there's a game, and you have to have sex with us, it's sort of like, all right, I think this probably should have been established a little bit earlier overall. That was a little vague, but I guess ultimately it doesn't really matter. I mean, the guards are sadistic as is, so it's sort of like they're probably, talking with each other and all that, except for you got Frank Serrone in this, who, has a pretty intimate scene with Kristara as well. I think I've called it Kristara. I don't know which is which, so I do apologize. But a pretty well shot an intimate scene between the two of them. Although I do feel bad for my man, because at the end of the film they have this whole Jailhouse Girls starring Ginger Lynn and Jerry Abel and all this and that. Okay, so they have like shots of them in the film with their names, and also Kelly Nichols and all this, and they cut to Frank Serrone, and I think I don't know if they forgot to say his name or what, but they cut to him, and there's like a pause, like they're gonna say his name. And they just don't. They just kind of move on. I'm like, oh, poor Frank, man. Everybody got credited but him. So I was laughing. I was like, man, did they just forget to credit him in the movie? Like, what's going on here, man? But anyways, yeah, speaking of Kelly Nichols in the film, Kelly Nichols is just one of my favorite actresses from this time. I'm just such a fan of her, of course, from like Roommates and just so many other wonderful films. Man, I think she's just such a great screen presence in her own right. And she has this final scene with her, Ginger Lynn and Paul Thomas. And one of the things I thought was real peculiar, which they didn't really go back to, is that towards the end of the film, they're trying to seduce the Paul Thomas, who's playing one of the guards. Kind of tries to seduce him to then get out of the jail, but she like ties a string around his penis and then like tightens it, and I was like, oh man, what is gonna happen here? She's gonna like torture Paul Thomas, get out of the situation, be like, you let us go. And no, they don't cut back to that again. I think she just does it that one time, and I'm like, man, what was that about, man? It was just bizarre. That kind of came out of nowhere. It's completely strange. And funnily enough, yeah, there's also the scene early on I forgot to mention between Ginger Lynn and Joey Silvera, where in terms of the editing of this film, he's assaulting her and he's about to finish. So you see the upper half of his body, and he he exhales. He's like, oh, I've done what I had to do. And then it cuts back to the actual finishing shot, and it was his bizarre kind of editing hiccup there. And also as well at the end when you have Ginger Lynn and Kelly Nichols, who are completely naked, and then in the very next frame they are completely clothed running away. So it was just a couple editing hiccups like that. But overall, man, when we have a cast of characters like this, I think it's easy for a lot of the actors and actresses to kind of get lost in the shuffle. I mean, there's a fair amount of sex scenes in the film, and a fair amount of different performers, actors and actresses kind of playing throughout. There's not a whole lot of overlap. I mean, Ginger Lynn has a couple, Kristara Barrington has a couple. Paul Thomas has a couple, but there's not a lot of overlap, man, which is something that, you kind of take for granted. Of just like, well, we'll have one actor or actress will do two or three or four, and it'll be good. But here you got a fair amount, man, a good amount of variety in here. It's well shot for the most part. I mean, like I said, it has some of the trappings that some of these adult films fall into, where it's just like, hey, let's get really close to the performers, and we can just show the genitals, and that's good enough. But I think overall here, even though it has that mean streak to it, like I said, that scene between Barrington and Serrone, really well done, very intimate. There's a lot of moments of eroticism throughout that genuinely work, and I think that if you're attracted to these kind of films, like, it's not even necessarily a roughie, even though you have these kind of sequences. But I think there's enough here that I would recommend this, man. I think this is a solid film overall. It moves at a good pace. There's a fair amount of sex in this, and overall, I just, if you're looking for something a bit on the meaner side, but maybe it's not so much that it's a total turnoff. I mean, the assault sequences are they are what they are. They're Ginger Lynn really sells it. But, if you're looking for it to get to maybe a certain kind of mean, not too, like, ugly, but just about the point where you're like, ooh, then I think this is a solid film, man. I actually quite like this film, and I would definitely recommend it. So yeah, man, Henri Pachard. I think this might be the first film of his that I've actually covered for this show. I don't know. But Jailhouse Girls, 1984. Yeah, check it out. It's a cool film, man. So that's what I got to say about Jailhouse Girls. Take a look, see if you can find it online, give it a watch, and yeah, that's all I got to say. That's all I got to say about it. What to say? All I got to say? Good lord, man, I'm losing my mind. I'm losing my mind here, guys. So I'm gonna stop talking and get out of here. So thank you guys for listening to another episode of Peephole Pictures. I should also say that the show does have an Instagram page now, so you can look that up on Instagram under Peephole Pictures. It might be under peephole.pictures. Either way, you'll be able to find it. It's the same kind of logo that I got for the YouTube channel here and on Spotify as well. So, hey, that's all I got to say. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.